Welcome to the Sex Science Podcast, where we turn the latest peer-reviewed research on intimacy and sexuality into fun, accessible conversations. Generated by AI and fact-checked by experts, the Sex Science Podcast was created by LaShaw to empower you through knowledge. So, join us as we explore pleasure, relationships, human connection, and everything in between.
Today, we're diving into a topic that might be a little bit taboo for some folks, but we think it's really important to talk about it.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about mutual masturbation.
Yeah, it's something that I think a lot of people are curious about, but don't always feel comfortable talking about.
Exactly. And, we got some fascinating research on this topic, and we're excited to really break it down with all of you today.
Definitely an area where we can use more information.
Right. Yeah. So let's jump right into it. The research article we're looking at is titled "The Role of Mutual Masturbation Within Relationships: Associations with Sexual Satisfaction and Sexual Self-Esteem."
Okay.
It was published in 2023 in the International Journal of Sexual Health, so very recent research.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and the authors, Kalut and their colleagues, did some really interesting work here, moving beyond just, anecdotal evidence to give us some hard data.
Yeah, going beyond just asking people what they think, but really looking at actual trends and behaviors.
Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the first things that jumped out at me from this study is that half of all couples have incorporated mutual masturbation into their intimate lives recently.
Wow.
Pretty surprising, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it really challenges the idea that it's rare or taboo. You know what I mean?
It's like this hidden pleasure that people are enjoying, but not always talking about openly.
Exactly. This research really helps us see what's actually going on out there in the world of human sexuality.
Absolutely. So it begs the question, why is something so common still so hush-hush?
Yeah, it's a good question, right?
Is it because it doesn't fit into those traditional, sexual scripts that we're often told about?
I think so. I think we have all these ideas about how we're supposed to behave sexually.
Right.
And oftentimes mutual masturbation doesn't really fit neatly into those boxes.
It's like there's this hierarchy of, acceptable sexual activities, and mutual masturbation gets kind of pushed to the sidelines.
Exactly. And that can really have an impact on how people view and experience it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the experiences themselves.
Okay.
The study found that men reported significantly higher positive feelings about mutual masturbation compared to women.
That's interesting.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think it probably comes down to the fact that there's still this double standard when it comes to men's and women's sexuality.
Right.
Men are often given more leeway to explore their sexuality.
Yeah.
While women still face more judgment and pressure to kind of conform to certain expectations.
That's a really good point.
It
makes you realize how much these societal norms can actually affect our own personal experiences.
Absolutely. They really shape our comfort levels and even our ability to enjoy certain things.
Well said now. On to one of the most fascinating findings to me, at least in the study, was the link between recent mutual masturbation and higher levels of sexual satisfaction.
Really?
Yeah, for both men and women.
Sure.
And this really challenges the assumption that people only masturbate when they're unhappy with their sex life with their partner, right?
Yeah, it completely flips that idea on its head.
It does.
It challenges that compensatory model, like you were saying.
Right, like it's not about, I'm not getting what I need from my partner, so I'm going to do this on my own.
Right. It's not a substitute at all.
Yeah.
This study shows that mutual masturbation can be a way to actually enhance a relationship and add another layer of pleasure and enjoyment.
So for our listeners out there, this suggests that it can actually be a positive thing for their relationship and not something to be ashamed of or avoid.
Absolutely. It opens up new avenues for exploration, and pleasure strengthens the connection between partners. It's about being curious and discovering what works for you as a couple.
Yeah, I love that reframing of it. Now, there's another finding that I found a little bit puzzling.
Okay, what's that?
The researchers had actually expected to see a connection between mutual masturbation and higher sexual self-esteem.
Oh, interesting.
But they didn't find that link statistically. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that speaks to just how complex our feelings are about sex. I mean, on one hand, mutual masturbation can definitely create these feelings of, skill and connection.
Right.
But on the other hand, it can also trigger insecurities.
Yeah.
Right. If someone feels like they're being watched or judged, or like they have to perform in a certain way.
Like it's both liberating, but also maybe a little nerve-wracking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that self-esteem is influenced by so many different things,
right,
both internal and external. And when it comes to sexuality, it's always important to check in with yourself and make sure that you're doing things that feel good and authentic to you,
Mm-hmm.
not just to please a partner or live up to some external expectation.
That's a powerful message for sure. So we've established that mutual masturbation is more common than people might think.
Yeah.
And that it can have real benefits for couples. But there's another piece of this puzzle that we need to explore.
Okay.
And that's the influence of those societal norms that we talked about earlier.
Not those sexual scripts.
Exactly. How do those scripts affect how we perceive and experience mutual masturbation?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. It's like these scripts become so ingrained in our minds that we don't even realize they're shaping our thoughts and behaviors.
Right. It's like they're operating in the background.
Exactly. And unfortunately, mutual masturbation often gets left out of these acceptable scripts,
Like it's this hidden pleasure that people enjoy but don't always feel comfortable talking about.
Exactly.
So how do we break free from these scripts?
Absolutely.
How do we create a space where mutual masturbation can be explored, without shame or judgment?
Well, I think the first step is awareness. We need to recognize that these scripts exist and understand how they might be influencing us.
Right, like shining a light on them.
Exactly. And once we've done that, we can start to question them and create our own definitions of what feels good and right for us.
I love that idea of rewriting our own scripts.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership of our pleasure and defining intimacy on our own terms.
Absolutely.
So let's get a little bit practical for a moment.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to someone who's, curious about exploring mutual masturbation, but feels a bit intimidated or unsure where to begin?
I think the most important thing is communication. If you're in a relationship, sit down with your partner and have an open and honest conversation about your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Share your curiosity, any concerns you might have, and what you're hoping to experience.
So it sounds like it's more about creating a safe and comfortable space for exploration rather than, mastering any particular techniques.
Exactly. It's about building that trust and intimacy. And remember, it's a two-way street.
Right.
Be open to hearing your partner's perspective as well. They might have their own anxieties or questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And what if one partner is more enthusiastic about the idea than the other?
That's a common scenario, and I think the key is to avoid any kind of pressure or coercion.
Right.
If one person is hesitant, respect their feelings and don't try to force them into anything they're not comfortable with.
So consent is absolutely essential.
Absolutely no one should ever feel obligated to participate in any sexual activity,
Yeah.
even within a committed relationship.
Right. It should be a shared experience that enhances pleasure and connection, not something that creates tension or discomfort.
Exactly.
Now, for couples who are both on board and ready to explore, are there any practical tips for making the experience more enjoyable?
Sure. Setting the mood is always a good idea.
Right.
Just like with any other intimate activity, creating a relaxing and sensual atmosphere can make a big difference. Dim the lights, put on some music you both enjoy, maybe light some candles.
Right. Those little touches can really enhance the experience.
They really can. And don't be afraid to get creative. Explore different techniques, experiment with different positions, and even consider incorporating toys if that's something you're both comfortable with.
Right. It's all about finding what feels good for you as a couple.
Exactly.
Now, in the research article you sent in, there was this mention of cliteracy
Yes.
and its relevance to mutual masturbation. Can you explain what that term means?
So cliteracy is all about understanding the clitoris, where it is, how it works, and what kind of touch feels best.
Right. And I think a lot of people might be surprised to learn that both men and women lack this basic knowledge.
It's true. It's like this part of female anatomy has been shrouded in mystery for far too long.
Right. And that lack of knowledge can lead to a lot of frustration and missed opportunities for pleasure.
Absolutely. When both partners understand the clitoris and its role in female sexual pleasure, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
It's about moving beyond those outdated assumptions and embracing a more accurate and fulfilling understanding of female sexuality.
Precisely. And for men, understanding cliteracy can really deepen their appreciation for their partner's body and enhance their ability to provide satisfying stimulation.
So it's a win-win for everyone involved.
Absolutely. It's a key ingredient for a more fulfilling and equitable sexual experience.
This has been so insightful. We've learned that mutual masturbation is a common and potentially very satisfying practice that can enhance intimacy and connection within a relationship. We've also explored the influence of sexual scripts and the importance of cliteracy in fostering a more fulfilling experience.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But there's one more area I think we should touch on, and that's the potential challenges and how to navigate them.
Okay.
Because Even though mutual masturbation can be incredibly rewarding, it's important to acknowledge that it's not always smooth sailing for every couple. You know.
That's a good point. Like with anything else in a relationship, open communication and a willingness to learn and grow together are essential.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those potential challenges. What are some common hurdles that couples might face when exploring mutual masturbation?
Well, one common challenge is navigating, different comfort levels and desires between partners.
Right.
One person might be really eager to jump right in.
Yeah.
While the other person might feel a little more hesitant or even apprehensive.
Makes sense. It's like with any new experience, right?
Yeah.
People are going to approach it with different levels of, comfort and readiness.
Right.
So how can couples navigate those differences without anyone, feeling pressured or uncomfortable?
I think it all goes back to communication.
Okay.
It's so important to create a space where both partners can express their feelings openly and honestly without fear of judgment.
Yeah.
And, if one person isn't quite ready to, fully engage in mutual masturbation,
Right.
maybe they can start by just talking about it.
Yeah. Oh.
Sharing fantasies or even just being present while their partner masturbates.
Sort of like dipping their toes in the water before taking the full plunge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about finding a pace that feels comfortable for both partners.
Right.
And it might take some time to find that sweet spot, and that's okay.
What about those feelings of self-consciousness or insecurity that can sometimes come up during sexual experiences? I imagine those might be, amplified when you're engaging in something as intimate as mutual masturbation.
Absolutely. It's natural to feel a bit vulnerable when you're, exposing yourself both physically and emotionally to your partner.
Right.
You might worry about how you look, how you sound, what
Yeah.
your partner is thinking.
Sure.
Those are all valid feelings.
So how can couples create a dynamic where they feel safe and accepted even when those insecurities pop up?
Well, first and foremost, acknowledge those feelings.
Okay.
Don't try to suppress them or pretend they're not there. Talk to your partner about them.
Yeah.
Let them know what you're feeling and why.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are they have their own insecurities they're dealing with too.
Sharing those vulnerabilities can actually strengthen the bond between partners, right?
Exactly. And remember, mutual masturbation is about pleasure and connection,
Right.
not performance.
Right.
It's not about trying to be perfect or live up to some unrealistic ideal.
Yeah.
It's about enjoying the experience and sharing that enjoyment with your partner.
It's about letting go of those self-critical thoughts and focusing on the sensations and the connection you're creating in that moment.
Precisely. Now, another aspect of mutual masturbation that can be a bit tricky is communication during the act itself.
Okay.
It's not always easy to verbalize what feels good, especially when you're in the midst of such an intense experience.
Right. So how can couples navigate that communication piece effectively?
Well, I think it's a combination of verbal and nonverbal cues.
Okay.
Pay attention to your partner's body language, their breathing, the sounds they're making.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all valuable indicators of what feels good and what doesn't.
Right.
And don't be afraid to use your words as well. Let your partner know what you're enjoying, what you'd like more of, or what you might want them to try differently.
It's like creating this feedback loop of pleasure and responsiveness.
Exactly. And as you become more comfortable with each other,
Yeah.
you can experiment with different forms of communication, whether it's through whispers, moans, or even playful instructions.
Adding a little playfulness can definitely make it more fun and exciting.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways you'd like our listener to remember?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that mutual masturbation can be a really fulfilling and intimate experience for couples.
Yeah.
But it's important to approach it with open communication, respect, and a willingness to learn and grow together.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's about moving beyond those restrictive sexual scripts
Right.
and embracing a more expansive and inclusive view of what's possible in the realm of pleasure and connection.
And remember, cliteracy is key.
Oh yeah, don't forget that.
Understanding the clitoris and its role in female sexual pleasure can make a world of difference for both partners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this deep dive has been all about empowering you to explore your sexuality with confidence and curiosity.
So we encourage you to continue this conversation with your partner. What are your thoughts and feelings about mutual masturbation? How can you incorporate it into your relationship in a way that feels safe, pleasurable, and fulfilling for both of you? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Sex Science Podcast brought to you by LaShaw. We hope that you learned something new about the wonderful world of human intimacy and sexuality, and join us next time as we dive into more fascinating research. And remember, science is for you. Music for this podcast was produced by SOUNDRAW.